Good evening and welcome to After Hours. Joining us this evening is Transit Chief Neil Dubord. Welcome to After Hours.
Thank you, Patrice.
And Transit spokesperson, who we've seen for years, Anne Drennan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So when I was living in Vancouver, I used to take transit all the time. And the SkyTrain always bothered me because there was no driver, and I always felt like I was on my own, and there was, it intimidated me. So why were the police brought on transit?
I think if I can start, and I'll turn it over to Anne as well. But
And you both can,
Okay.
compliment each other. I
Sure.
won't just direct questions at one or the other. Go ahead.
Oh, that's great. I think that we have a unique situation in the Lower Mainland where we have sort of a patchwork quilt of jurisdictional police departments that work amongst a large Metro Vancouver area. And in order for us to be able to maintain continuity and consistency throughout all those different jurisdictions, the train and the bus system runs through them all, 22 different jurisdictions. And as a result, we need to be able to have one police service that tracks all the activity on the train or the bus system. That way we can remain consistent and we can remain so that we're on top of the things that we should know about.
But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the buses, or have never in my time taking the buses, experienced, well, police might walk on, but it wasn't something that you expected to see. And to me, the SkyTrain was almost like I say, it was kind of intimidating because there was nobody I felt I could go to who would be there, like the driver on the bus, for example. So was there more sort of activity that the police needed to be there at the SkyTrain?
I think at the start there was more activity. I think when we began as special constables way back in the mid-90s, at that point in time it was needed for visual presence. We needed to be reassuring the public and provide them confidence in when they were using the SkyTrain system. So as we moved from special constables into a police department in 2005, that became more prevalent. We knew that just providing our customers' confidence for them to be able to use the SkyTrain system was what they were looking for. That whole idea of being able to be confident when they use the system.
Right. And so how has it changed? Like since 2005, maybe you have some of that perspective. What were the problems initially, and has it changed, and has it grown or not?
It's grown tremendously, yes. So many more people are using the system today, and the system itself, of course, has grown. The Canada line is in place and has been since the Olympics, and so that expanded things tremendously. Of course, the Evergreen line is being built right now, so it's ever increasing in terms of the numbers of people that are using the system. You mentioned about seeing police officers on buses. There are 1,400 buses running at any given time, so it's impossible for a police officer to be seen on every bus or even transit security. But what we try and do is focus on things like bus loops so that people can see the police officers, the drivers know the officers are there, the officers can check to see whether or not there might be any problems as the buses come in and out, that kind of thing. And as well, focus on the platforms of the SkyTrain stations. So again, as you mentioned, people have confidence that there are people around. There are other people, of course, at the SkyTrains. There are the SkyTrain attendants, and on the Canada Line attendants that people can go to for assistance as well, who will call us if we're required.
That was actually, that worked out really well because there's, 3 levels of authority? There's the SkyTrain attendants, security, and then the police. So if you can talk about what role each person plays.
Sure, absolutely. So what we look at is we have a continuum of safety and security, not unlike to say the RCMP. The Surrey RCMP would have their security, they would have community officers, they would have auxiliary, and then they would have RCMP officers. We have that same continuum of security on the SkyTrain system. So we would begin and we would have transit SkyTrain attendants, then we would have transit security, then we have transit supervisors, and then we would have transit police. So SkyTrain attendants, their main role is for customer service and wayfinding. So when someone comes up to a platform or when they're on their train, they're making sure that they're able to get on the trains properly and that the trains are always running and people can
They're
find their way.
going in the right direction.
Exactly.
That's always scary.
Exactly
too.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And transit security, they're around for visual presence. They wear a uniform, and the whole idea is for them to be able to provide a visual presence and protect property as such.
Vandalism is more there.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right. And then when we talk about transit supervisors, their whole role is to ensure that the buses and trains keep running. So for instance, if something happens on a bus and a bus breaks down, transit supervisor will respond and ensure the 40 people on that bus can continue on their destination. And then finally, transit police have the powers of the police. So search and seizure, the powers of arrest, and the ability to be able to investigate crime.
And so obviously the police, so the regular police, they aren't trained any differently. Talk a bit about that. They have weapons. Talk a bit about that.
Please.
Our officers, our recruits, go to the same police academy at the Justice Institute of BC as every other municipal police officer in the province of BC. So VPD, Abbotsford, et cetera, they're all in the same classes together and are trained together to the same standards, fully certified officers. So there very often is a perception out there that transit police officers are different in some way, that because they work
Less,
for
I would
transit,
think. Or,
always
less dealing
The
with,
perception is always less.
of the-
You know, you hear the stuff about what are they, glorified fare checkers. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are bona fide, fully certified, fully trained police officers who investigate criminal offenses in the same way that other police officers in singular municipalities do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how does it mix, like within Vancouver and then going outside of Vancouver? How do the police communicate and mix?
You're right. So often we'll go through I'll speak in specifics. So we
Okay.
would have a crime that occurs in Surrey, and you would have the victim that would stay perhaps at the Surrey Central Station, but the suspects would jump on the train, and before you know it, they would be in New Westminster.
Right.
And that would take about 5 to 7 minutes for them to be in New Westminster. They would get off, and then they committed another crime in New Westminster, hopped on the train again, and went through Burnaby and ended up in Vancouver, where they committed another crime. So in a matter of 20 minutes, they had gone
That
through...
sounds pretty scary, actually. But anyways,
Certainly happens.
Yeah. They had gone through 4 jurisdictions, 4 different
Yeah.
police departments, and really the only continuity of that whole event was the transit police, because we were involved in all of them, so we were able to tie it all together. Surrey has their own dispatch center, New West has their own, Burnaby has their own, and Vancouver has their own.
so what kind of crimes are we looking at here? And I guess what kind of training for the police officers in terms of, like, I think about, people who have mental health issues, whether it be drug type issues that are happening. What are you looking at the SkyTrain, and then talk a bit about
You can
what
probably talk
police
about our
need.
priorities. Go ahead.
Sure. Patrice, you've really hit it on the head.
Yeah.
We have 4 priorities this year that we're really concentrating on. The first one is around sexual harassment and sexual offending on SkyTrains and buses. We know that that is an underreported crime, and potentially there's a high opportunity for victimization. So we're concentrating on how we can make people more aware and protect themselves better.
The crowded situation, tight
Absolutely.
crowded.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And the groping and the touching.
It's a predator's
Yes.
dream.
It is, absolutely. So the second piece is around bus operator assaults or frontline worker assaults. And maybe I can let Anne talk a little bit about what happened this week. There was
Yes.
a significant one that happened this week.
On Tuesday afternoon in Vancouver, a bus on Broadway at Fraser picked up 3 young men and 3 young women. They got on through the back doors, so they didn't have to pay, and moved straight to the back of the bus and started drinking liquor and yelling, screaming, etc. Another passenger moved up to the driver and said, those young people back there are drinking alcohol openly, and they're being very disruptive and upsetting quite a few people on the bus. So the bus driver went back, pulled the bus over just before Broadway and Oak at a bus stop, stopped of course, and walked back and said, hey, you can't drink liquor on the bus, and I'm gonna have to ask you to get off. Interestingly, the 3 young guys complied and got off, but not the 3 young women, and they attacked the female bus driver.
Okay, because I heard a story. You hear
Yep.
stories, so okay,
And they
good.
grabbed her by the hair and pulled her down onto the floor, and then proceeded to beat her. Then actually tried to pull her off the rear doors, through the rear doors of the bus by the hair. And fortunately, some other passengers intervened. A couple
Brave
of them
of them.
grabbed the girls, absolutely.
Yes.
Grabbed the girls, and a couple grabbed the driver to hold her on the bus so she wouldn't be pulled off outside onto the ground. And at this point, the girls thought better of what was going on, I guess, and ran away. They were arrested by police just a few blocks away in a small park. They had stolen 9 bottles of liquor just a short while before boarding the bus. And this is what they had cracked open one of the bottles and, you know, were just pouring it and partying, yeah. So the 3 young men were eventually released without charge because they weren't actually involved in the assault at all. The 3 young women were each charged with 1 count of assault. They were in jail overnight. All 3 were released the next day on conditions. One, the eldest, a 22-year-old, actually went to a recovery house. So, you know, maybe she'll get some help there. You never know. We can always hope, I guess. Unfortunately, one of the things that happened was in the conditions that they were all given, only one of the 3 was given a condition of not being allowed to ride the bus anymore, or at least for a given period of time, which is very, very annoying for us, disappointing, but very upsetting for the bus driver that was assaulted. And she has now said publicly that that now is her biggest fear, is that if she continues to drive the bus, she knows that 2 of the 3 are out there
she might
and
be a
know who she
target.
is, and she could be targeted. So it's hard to explain to somebody, you know, how the system might do that. There really is no good explanation, I guess. So that kind of thing is very upsetting.
So what would have been the process in terms of the bus driver? Like, what is their responsibility in terms of how they deal with the public, and then when do they contact you, or do they phone, or how does that work?
So on this particular occasion, I think the 911 call actually came in from the other people that were on the bus themselves, but the bus drivers do have an emergency button that they can contact immediately to their communications area, who will then call police directly. So they can even do that quietly so that no one would even know, right? They would press the button for help, and then their communication area would call the police.
Are there any like communications with transit workers and with the police on safety? Like, do you communicate or have workshops that talk about safety for either the drivers or the public, that
Absolutely.
kind of thing?
Drivers are given really good training with regards to de-escalation skills, how to communicate with people that may de-escalate a potentially violent situation. And we're part of that whole communication of what role we can play as well in that whole ability to de-escalate people that are getting excited.
And I think I sort of asked it before, but maybe we can talk a bit about more sort of special training for police officers when it comes to mental health issues, or whether it be drug problems. And can you really train for compassion? And talk a bit about that in terms of what police learn or need to learn.
Sure, I can start off. Our 3rd priority is actually dealing with mental health, and it's mental health / addictions and disorders as well. Mm-hmm. And we know that there's a large percentage of the people that we deal with in public transportation that are problematic customers, have mental health issues or addictions issues, and as a result, our officers have to be very well trained for that. So not only do they receive basic fundamental training at the JIBC, where they're given that training with other police officers, when they come back to the transit police, we continue to provide further training on how to be able to engage people properly that have addictions problems, and how we also help them get other resources.
Mm-hmm. One of the things lately I've been catching on TV is all these police shows. And first of all, so I want some response and discussion about what the reality of police work is really like.
Maybe
Now,
I'll let our
sometimes
media
it
lady.
seems really dangerous. Seems really dangerous
right.
out there, like when
That's
you
right.
talk about the bus driver and you talk about sexual assaults that have happened on the SkyTrain. But one of the things is they're always using guns and they're always shooting. What is the reality for police in terms of that?
That isn't the reality, fortunately, at least not here. And in fact, in Canada, the U.S. is a little bit different, I think, but there's an element of risk, certainly, and when you join a police department, you know that there's an element of risk. One of the things you have to remember is that we're very well trained. Our officers are very well trained, and they're trained in various levels of use of force, various levels of de-escalation in terms of incidents, so that these higher levels of force very rarely have to be used. So while, yes, guns might be taken out of the holster on occasion, it's very rare, a very rare occasion when an officer here has to use them. But they have to be aware that at times it might be required and be proficient in terms of the use of their firearm if in fact they have to use it.
And they must keep up with that through
Oh,
the years.
absolutely,
Of,
absolutely.
You know, one thing that the shows do, though, they create unrealistic expectations. You know, when you watch a 60-minute television show, they go from the beginning of an investigation till the end of an investigation in 60 minutes, and you've got the DNA analyzed, and boy, you've solved the entire problem, when in fact it takes far longer than that. And sometimes the average community member doesn't understand that an investigation may take 4 or 5, 6 months to actually get all that work done that they do in 60 minutes on a television show.
You'll also hear in the media so often, you know, there'll be a crime that's reported, it's a big enough deal that it's on the news shows and newscasts, and then, you know, several days later, suddenly the story is now that police have still not charged anybody in that, you know, and this carries on for a while, you know, and this is repeated over and over in different ways, you know, that there have been no arrests, and yet there still have been no arrests, you know, and it's like, whoa, slow down here. You know, we have a whole team of officers investigating the hell out of this file, and we will get there, but it doesn't happen like it does, as the chief says, on a television show, you know. I mean, DNA is a perfect example.
Yes.
You know, they get their DNA, if you notice, on the shows, just like that. You know, it's incredible. We love it. In real life, it can take months and months to get DNA back. So, I mean, it's just so different in terms of reality versus TV. There's no comparison. And people get really torqued. They say, well, I saw it on TV, you know, why can't you do that?
well, and it's kind of like, too, in the media, sometimes I've been frustrated. You hear about a story, whatever it may be, a tragic story.
Right.
But then somehow you never hear the end of it. You probably see the end of it, or at least most of the end of it.
Right.
But we never see, I never know what happened in that situation, or if you did find out what happened.
Right.
That might have a happy ending, even, you know.
At
But
times,
talk
yeah.
about that a bit.
Sometimes that's the case. They don't follow through because the latter part of it is not as sensational as the initial part. And, you know, it's just not as exciting, and so they'll drop it and just, as you say, just leave it hanging. And people will ask you, you know, sometimes just a couple of years later, whatever happened in such and such file, you never saw anything, you know, and you tell them, and it's pretty straightforward then. It's like, oh, well, this is what happened, you know, but that wasn't very exciting, so it wasn't picked up by the media in any big way.
You know what's changing a little bit, though, in that is that we have social media now. And the ability for us to be able to bring the conclusion of an investigation back to some form of media, whether it be through social media or through our website, whatever it might be. So it is sort of changing the way that is done. It isn't done like it was 10 years ago.
More. It's not so isolated in one place.
Absolutely.
Okay, back on the shooting thing in television, and you've sort of talked a bit about it, but one of the things that watching these police shows is not only are they shooting a lot, but when they shoot to kill. And I often wonder, why didn't you just shoot that person in the leg? First of all, they had information you needed. Instead, you just killed them.
That's right.
Talk a bit about that.
Sure, I can open up and then I'll turn it over to Anne as well. Shooting is never as easy as they make it seem on TV either, right? I have seen guys running downstairs and pointing their weapon, being able to, you know, fire deadly accurately. And the truth is, it isn't like that at all, right? When you're taught to be able to stop whatever action. If you have to actually shoot, that means there's been some sort of violent action that you need to stop. And we're taught to be able to stop that violent action. So we would typically shoot for the biggest body area that would be available to us. Center mass is what it would be called. And that's how we would typically try to stop whatever action is taking place. Usually, because of the risk associated with missing an arm or missing a leg, you know, shooting particular just for those limbs, it would be too risky. So we would teach our officers, you know, just try for the biggest area you can to be able to stop the action if you need to shoot at all.
So what is the typical situation where the gun might be used? If there is one, I don't know.
Well, one would be, for example, if we have information that the suspect is armed. our officers would have the gun at the ready. And so
Right.
they would take their gun out of their holster and just, keep their finger off the trigger initially, but be ready. So have it at the ready at their side just to be prepared because, they could well be facing someone that is armed. So that's the kind of scenario. You'll see occasionally on the roadsides or on the roads what's called Code 5 stop. And that's where a vehicle is being stopped where it's believed that somebody at least, or perhaps more than one person inside, is armed. And you'll see officers with their guns drawn approaching the vehicle and issuing orders to the people inside the vehicles. And again, it's the same thing. You have information that somebody's armed and you need to be at the ready.
Right, and what about on the SkyTrain? Like, in terms of, again, I guess seeing the difference between a police officer, let's say in the downtown east side,
Yes.
or, on the streets, as compared to on a SkyTrain or around the buses. Can you talk a bit about that? Is the
Certainly.
work as hard?
Absolutely. So it's the same sort of police work. As a matter of fact, I would suggest it might even be harder. And the reason being is because we see hundreds of thousands of people each and every day, but we deal with a very small percentage of those people. And the people that we deal with, the people that use public transportation, typically have problems, whether it be mental health issues, whether it be some sort of disorder or addiction issues. So those are the people that want to use public transportation to be able to get around because they can't afford vehicles. And that's that small percentage we're dealing with, not that large percentage. So those people are violent. They have violent past, whether they've been involved in assaults or stabbings or shootings before, they have some history.
So,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to
No,
say,
you go
sorry, I
ahead.
was just going to say,
Nope,
Patrice,
go
that
ahead.
transit is an excellent way for someone to get away, too. So, the suspect will commit a crime, as the chief said earlier, in one jurisdiction, and then they need to get away, and they want to get away quickly. They don't have a vehicle, and they'll run to transit, jump on the train, and away they go, and they're gone. And of course, we're then the ones who get the information about where they were last seen heading, perhaps to a particular station, and then we're the ones who then, follow through on the system itself. So that's not uncommon at all. Also, with mentally ill persons, they very often will ride the system constantly. It's a part of their whole problem, part of their illness, and they don't work or really have any kind of focus.
Oh, it's sort of their
That's
Their
a thing,
activity.
It's a thing to do,
yeah.
and
to be out in the world.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so they get on the buses or the trains, and they ride and ride and ride, and all too often they're off their meds, and they experience some kind of episode, something triggers something, and they just go off. And they'll go off on the train or on the buses. Sometimes on the buses, all too often, take it out on the bus operator. But on the trains, they can take it out on other passengers. So we have to be aware of that all the time. And our officers are really good at getting to know these people and recognizing them and monitoring them. So whenever they see them on the system, they're very much aware of them
Of who they are.
and-
They've
and-
come across them more
and
than
what they're
once.
like at that particular time. Whether they seem like they've got it together or whether they look like they might
Edgy.
be losing it.
Sure.
Exactly.
What are they actually showing us right now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, what kind of
So-
behaviors?
Because police officers have that kind of close contact with people, do officers take, maybe this isn't the right way to put it, political action? Or do advocacy type work in the sense that if you're running across people who have no place to go and may need some kind of housing, can you talk to, your fellow officers and then maybe government to tell what the needs might be? Is there that
Absolutely.
kind of communication?
It starts immediately. So, first of all, it's intervention. It's about being able to stop what's going on. So if someone is on the train and perhaps they're homeless, it's about how do we get them someplace to stay. So we reach out immediately and try to build partnerships that we can assist someone in looking for a home. The long-term piece, that's more that happens from the leadership area of the police service, that we begin to build those partnerships with ministries and with other social agencies to be able to assist those that are most in need.
Several years ago, I think it's probably longer than I think it is, I believe it was Justice Wally Opal who did a report on police and some of the changes that might need to happen. And one of the things that stood out to me is he thought more women should be involved in the police force. So I wanted to ask both of you, well, first of all, is there more police officers in terms of, because they started doing the SkyTrain, so did you have to add more? And what kind of people are coming to the police force?
Let me start about sort of how SkyTrain Police came, or the transit police came into being, and then I'll let Anne talk a little bit more about women in policing. So when we began, we needed 80 officers to begin policing in 2005, and it had to happen fairly quickly. Every year we put approximately 12 people through the Justice Institute of British Columbia. So for us, in order to start out, we had to rely on other police officers coming from different police departments to be able to build our police department. Since 2006, we've hired 72% of the people that we hire. The transit police have been new recruits. So we like to bring new people into the organization. It creates a new culture as such, and many of those are
Fresh
women.
blood.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely, and it creates the customer service style that we want to encourage as we go forward. And we call it the transit police way, about how we're approachable and how we're accessible and how we also are accountable. And then I'll let Anne talk a little bit about women in policing and sort of where we're at and going forward.
What is our percentage of women? Do you know? I'm not even sure what our percentage of women is.
I think it's in the area of 15 to 16% at this point in time.
Which is pretty much the norm across the country, I think. Vancouver is a bit higher. Vancouver has had the opportunity in the last 10, 12 years to hire a lot of women. And more women want to get into policing, which is great, and are extremely well qualified. And so most police departments now are finding that a high percentage of their applicants are women. Women are now getting promoted into the higher ranks as well, which is great.
I was going to ask you about that,
Yeah.
detectives and that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
it's the norm. It's not anything uncommon. Nobody thinks twice about it. Women are promoted just as easily and quickly as men, if in fact they're capable. And so it really is becoming almost totally sort of equal work, equal pay, just right across the board. Everything is equal, So I think now you don't even get the same kind of comments anymore from people about being a woman in a uniform. You used to get it all the time, get your picture taken. Ridiculous stuff, like you're some sort of oddity or had two heads or something. But that doesn't happen anymore. It's expected that you'll see a woman police officer, and you very rarely get that comment anymore. Oh, couldn't they have sent a policeman? Did they have to send a woman? I'd rather have a policeman. You don't get that very often anymore. So things have changed dramatically for the better, we think, of course.
Thank you two for doing this. We're
Out of time?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks for
for
the great
doing it.
opportunity.
It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.